Is love blind? Is love blind? We will see.
Let's watch. Okay, some people sent me this article, and I thought I would sneak it in this reaction video to talk about it because I think it's important for us to read. I haven't read it yet. So this is on People. So they're interviewing Chris Colin, who is, I believe, the showrunner, right? So how did Lydia and Uche manage to both get cast? Is there a vetting process? All right. He says, absolutely, 100%. We do a very thorough vetting process across all kinds of criteria. We really go to some great lengths, and to the best of our ability, we try to ensure that the pool of people in the pods don't know each other. Obviously, we're not infallible, and this one happened. However, it happened, and we had to deal with the ramifications of it. So something is fishy there, because either they don't do a lot of vetting, because all they had to do was ask Uche and or Lydia, tell us who one significant relationship you've had in the past couple of years. You know, one or both of them would have said, oh, well, there's this person. And so what's the vetting process look like? The other thing is that if they did ask, Lydia and Uche might have lied about it. Now, if they both lied about it, then that's fishy. But you could see that, right? You could see how if you had a relationship in the past that you're just like, I just don't really want to get into it. And you don't want to tell a bunch of strangers about it because they might look up the person on social media. It's like, I've been single for 5 years. You could imagine someone doing that. Who knows? Or is the vetting process this really janky thing? I think I heard a rumor that they might look through someone's Instagram to try to find whether or not but who knows? And I'll also throw out there that it's possible that they did ask Lydia and Uche, and they do know that Lydia and Uche lied to production for some reason, and they don't want to throw them under the bus because they don't want to start some kind of fight with them. It's also possible that they don't do much vetting. A lot of people are saying that this was by design, that they actually wanted this to happen, which is possible, but I don't know. I don't think it's likely because they invest a lot of money, is the thing, millions upon millions of dollars into making this entertainment TV show. And a lot depends on the audience believing that it is as real as possible. And if they start screwing around with that sort of stuff, I mean, at the very least, if they did do this by design, it would be one of the dumbest moves they've ever. This is a very, if not one of the most successful reality TV shows of our time. And you don't need to mess with it. You don't need to create that kind of drama. People watch it anyway. In fact, I personally really like this show because it doesn't seem to have that kind of manufactured look to it. It obviously does at times. We have documented moments where the editing, like with Jackie, but the vibe of the show doesn't seem to be nearly as manipulative or manufactured as, say, Darcy and Stacey is, or certain segments of 90 Day Fiancé. But anyway, okay, so he's saying that when they found out, that first meeting between Uche and Lydia, they said, we immediately stopped them, pulled them aside, prevented them from going back into the mix in the pods, and brought them to separate interview rooms. I think that's very likely. I think this is probably very likely true. We said to them first, I don't know how this happened. This is awful. I know you've planned to be here and you've gone through this whole process and now you know each other. I don't know how we can continue with you in this experiment. I know that sucks. So they're saying that initially they're like, this sucks, but we're going to have to remove you from the experiment, which would be the smart move. Then he goes on, and they're like, Lydia and Uche, you mean you're going to send us home? And we said, I don't know how you can continue. And they were like, we want to continue. Chris goes on. Again, these are separate conversations, meaning that they're talking to Uche separately than Lydia. But basically, they're both saying the same thing. We want to continue and we want to be here and we're really serious. Each of them said, we have no interest in dating the other one. Both of them spoke very glowingly of the other. Both of them said, it was kind of on and off, but no interest moving forward. We really want to find somebody that's committed to this. And then Chris says, they said, if we were to allow you to continue being part of this experiment, knowing that you are really passionate about being here, we will allow you to continue under one condition. And then he says, we never police what anybody says, but in this case, it was the only time where we said, we would like if you would not reveal this to the others. So Chris is saying, we initially wanted them to leave, but they were so passionate about staying. And, you can imagine that the production's like, this isn't a good look if we remove them, plus reduces the pool of people to 14. They might have even kind of detected that the two of them might, because imagine if they did kick him out, then they would have one couple. They might have even detected, who knows? It's like, these people might be the sort of people that might make it to the end, who knows? And then Chris says, we never tell people that you can't say things, is what he's claiming. And then he says, but in this case, we said, you can't say anything. So this is interesting. That was what I was wondering, because for both of them to not say anything, for both of them to just straight up lie to everybody, it just seemed strange, and particularly for Lydia, because she's such a talker, you would imagine she would say even if she wanted to keep it secret. So, that does stand to reason that the production said, you can't tell anybody. If you're going to stay, you can't tell anybody. Okay, and then later in the article, it basically confirms one of the hypotheses that I had, at least in my mind, was that they at some point are like, he doesn't word it this way, but they're like, Lydia and Uche are going to the proposal phase, because most people don't. Because, you can imagine them in the beginning thinking like, well, we'll let them stay, but odds are Uche and Lydia won't make it to the end and it won't be a problem. But both of them did. And so then they're thinking, well, this has to be revealed, because if we do this lie through the honeymoon thing, and eventually it'll come out on social media, it's not a good look. I'm sure they considered that, right? I'm sure they considered, well, you can never ever say ever, but eventually on social, so they'd probably be blasted for that, and it would really undermine the whole trust of the show, right? Because if they did something like that, then we would wonder about all the seasons, that maybe people knew each other all along, right? So they make the decision like, okay, well, we're gonna be focusing on these two, so we have to have them tell their person. So they say, so they're talking to Uche and Lydia, we don't want you to walk out of here, whether you made the choice to get engaged or not get engaged. So this is before they're about to get engaged, but it looks like it was heading that direction. If you're interested in someone, we give you our full blessing to reveal that you've dated in the past if you want to. Okay, then People asks Chris Colin, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but they're asking the showrunner, do you think that Lydia and or Uche secretly knew that the other person was actually going to be on the show? And he basically says that he doesn't have any idea if they conspired, because everything that's on the show is basically what he saw. But he does say something that's kind of interesting. He says, I know pretty much everything that they said that plays out on the show, but I don't know the truth. And I'm not an investigator, so it's not really worthwhile for me to go back in and forensically analyze what happened where. So that's an interesting statement. I don't know the truth, meaning that I think he's saying, well, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that it happened, but I don't know the truth. I don't know. I'm just reading into it. Maybe if he were allowed to be a little bit more honest, he would say, well, there are some indications that there was some shenanigans going on. Oh, and then they ask him, knowing what you knew, that Uche and Lydia were a thing before, was it hard watching Lydia develop such a tight bond with Aaliyah in the living quarters? Right, because you can imagine the producers are like, Aaliyah and Lydia and Uche, there's a triangle happening right here. We've never seen two people in the lounge actually bond like this, and da-da-da. So then Chris says, To be honest with you, from my own personal standpoint, I had no idea that was happening. So when you hear that, you think, how do you not know? But then he goes on. Again, there are 89 cameras in the pods, and when I'm in the control room, normally what I'm watching, if I'm watching something, I'm normally watching dates. It's hard to keep track of everything. Okay, so he's claiming that, for him anyway, he didn't notice that Aaliyah and Lydia were bonding to the extent that they were, because he's saying there's 89 cameras, that are, I think, basically constantly shooting. And he's saying that if he's watching anything, he's watching the dates that are happening in the pods, because that's probably where most of the drama happens. And, I could totally see that, because the amount of, in the lounge, I'm guessing there's 5 to 10 cameras. And, zooming in, because they all have lapel mics on, right? So they're zooming in and the camera operators are trying to find like some interesting bits to follow. So the camera operators probably have, if you're a a lounge camera operator, you probably have a better idea as to what's going on in the lounge. But do the camera operators do they have an audio feed? Because that would also be weird, right? Because you have 30 lapel mics that have to be monitored, and you can't listen to all of them at the same time. Naturally, maybe there's a room mic or something. Anyway, point is that what he's saying is that he didn't notice it, and I could absolutely see that for the showrunner. But it'd be hard to believe that, because each of the cast members have their own personal producer, or their own personal team. I don't know if it establishes yet at that point, but I think it does. At the very least, there are lower level people that are assigned certain cast members, right? And particularly by a certain point, because it looks like, oh, those people, okay, you three people need to focus on that person. You imagine that happens. It'd be hard to believe that they didn't notice. Now, it's possible that there's a lot of noticings that are happening that are being sent up the chain of command, and not everything gets noticed. So, yeah, maybe. Is that an excuse that Chris is saying? It's like, I didn't know. Because I think the implication is that they should have stepped in earlier and told Lydia, look, if you want to tell Aaliyah, you have our blessing, so to speak. And you might want to tell Aaliyah sooner than later, because this could really hurt Aaliyah to have this come out of nowhere. So you should probably do it ASAP. So, if the show did know, which you imagine someone knew, and they decided not to do anything about it, then you could imagine them being motivated by that, right? That they're thinking, well, this will be quite a thing if we let it go on a little longer. Now, I'm guessing they weren't hoping that Aaliyah would just bounce from the whole thing. That might have blown up in their face. I don't know. And remember that I learned, and I don't know if any of this is true, but from the producer on the show, what they were saying is that different seasons are produced by an entire different crew and different showrunner, actually. Chris Cullen, I don't think he's technically the showrunner. I think he's like the executive producer. And then there's a showrunner that is underneath him, I think, that actually is the main person in charge, from my understanding. And seasons 1, 2, and 5 were one team of producers and camera operators and all, there's hundreds of people that are working behind the scenes. And then seasons 3, 4, and I think 6 and 7, which are I think so. 6 has already been filmed, and I think 7 just got filmed, from my understanding. Anyway, so it's possible that the shenanigans or the mistreatment allegations that we heard from season 2 with Nick and Danielle, whatever sort of cultural thing is going on with this production group, we've seen it in season 2 and in season 5. But I don't know. Who knows? Okay, then People asks, when Aaliyah announced she wanted to leave the experiment, how did you react? And just reading the bit here, basically they're saying they don't want to pressure people to do things they don't want to do. They don't want to be a go-between. And it sounds like that they had a long conversation with Aaliyah. Her producers had a long conversation with her, and Aaliyah said a lot of things and said, I want to leave, and here's why, and da-da-da, and dee-dee-dee. From the sound of it, in terms of the conversation with Uche over the speakerphone, it sounds like mainly Aaliyah had a problem with Lydia. But, maybe it was bigger than that. Maybe it's just like, now I have some questions about Uche as well. I don't know. But at the very least, it sounds like the producers had a lot of information. And then it sounds like the producers offered to Aaliyah, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to tell them in person? Do you not? And she opted to just leave. And they were left with knowing a lot of information from Aaliyah. But what he's saying is, we don't want to be a go-between. We don't want to go to Uche and says, here's what she said. If she decides that she doesn't want to tell him, then that's the way it's just going to have to be. And, you can imagine that would be, it would be tempting as a reality TV show to say, well, one, to pressure her to talk to him, because this is one of the biggest moments of this series of, all the seasons. That would be a very talked about meeting where Aaliyah talks with him, and they probably want to pressure her to go to the honeymoon, because then you want Lydia to be there and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that didn't happen at least points in the direction of maybe some ethical treatment of Aaliyah. So they would be thinking, well, at the very least, it would be more dramatic and better television if we say something to him. We got to give him, the producer would go like, here's what she said, and what do you think about that? That would be more footage to have some sort of reaction, because at the time they're sitting with the possibility that they would get no more footage, because they couldn't guarantee that Uche would want to call her later on speakerphone, that she would pick up the phone, that she would say anything. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty, whereas if they wanted to, they could just, now maybe if that happened and they couldn't get their conversation, they would resort to actually telling Uche what she had said or something like that. But anyway, so in that scene, we just hear someone come over the speaker and they're just like, Aaliyah has decided to leave the experiment. That's all they said, which from the sound of it, at least in terms of if we believe this, which who knows, then, I find that to be showing some integrity around it. It's just like, look, we're not here to mess with things. So if you want to talk to each other, go for it. If you don't, fine. Even if we know things, we're just not going to mess with it. So, but the one time they messed with it was to tell Lydia and Uche they can't tell anybody. And, he admitted that they don't like to normally do that. Now, of course, we know they very much mess with it in the editing room. It makes me wonder, and I did ask the producer about this, and she didn't know, because the editing team is like this whole other group of people. The editors aren't there on site, and the producers, once they're done shooting, they're done. Once it's all in the can, so to speak, all the recordings have been made, all the footage, they just walk away, the producers. And then it's up to this whole other group of people that edit it. And the integrity of both groups could be very different, right? Or the pressure or the instructions or something. And because I'm noticing a fair amount of 90 Day Fiancé types of editing this season, and it really bothers me. Like, they will show the same face. They did it with Taylor, where she has this face with JP, and then just like a minute later, they use the exact same look because they really liked that, because she looked like she was judgmental. She's like, she has this face, and they reused the footage to make it look like she reacted the same way to both times. It's possible it's two identical looks, but it's not likely because it's exactly the same. And I'm noticing a lot more cuts and a lot more edits. You can imagine that they were terrified of this show tanking because they only had 3 couples. So maybe the editors are just like scrambling to try to make something out of it. But I don't like it. Apparently, some of the producers, because that's why the producer reached out to me, is that she was a fan prior to even working in reality television. She was a fan of this channel, way back when, and she had no design, she had no plans of working in reality TV. And then one thing led to another, and she was in reality TV. And then she said to herself, well, one day it's possible that Kirk will react to a show that I have been on, which will be interesting. And then when that happened with Ultimatum Season 2, that's when she reached out. She's like, okay, it finally happened. You reacted to a show that I've worked on, if you'd like to talk. So, and then the article just kind of ends. Yeah, all right, well, it's information. We can take it with a grain of salt because they have a lot of reasons to obscure things, but I don't know. It is a response from them. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.